Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel where we review anything and everything. And today I just wanted to get into a little bit of a discussion just in regards to the Slave One ship, just some of my thoughts. And I've reviewed this already on the channel. I wouldn't call this necessarily a re-review, but just a kind of overlook, not just of the Lego set, but just the ship in general, the Slave One in general. I just kind of felt like in a space where I just wanted to kind of a little bit talk about some aspects of this ship, as I have it on my stand all the time and I'm always looking at it. I just really love this ship. So I wanted to come back and revisit it. So this is a ship where I always thought that when it came to the Slave One, it was very interesting. It was very strange. And I say that because besides for the fact that its layout and the way it looks and its design is definitely different than almost any other ship. Like no ships that are like this, but it's interesting also because, and I had mentioned this when I had did the build of this, that the layout of this ship in terms of its proportions has always been a little bit of a mystery to me. Don't mind you guys that there's a bit of dust inside this thing. All right, try to wipe some of that dust off. But so the layout of the ship has always been pretty interesting in terms of the size ratio, because I remember seeing in the original trilogy, you had a scene where Boba Fett is walking a Han Solo in the frozen carbonite up the back ramp, and in that scene, you get a true sense of the scale of the ship, and I feel it looks a lot more in line with the way that it is seen here. Let me try to move this back a little bit. All right, I try to have it on a little piece of soft material, so it's not scraping against this hard table, but it seems that it doesn't move very well when I do that, so I took that off. So in that scene, you know, Han Solo, I'm sorry, not Han Solo, Boba Fett. Let me pull this off really quickly, just so I can get one of the figures for the purpose of scale. We're gonna take Jango. And in that scene, okay, the ramp is coming down here now. And I'll just place him here. I don't know if he's gonna stand well without me sitting him on the, okay, I don't have him on any studs. But in the scene, I wanna say relative to that scene, this scale looked correct. If you guys remember that scene, it's in, if I'm not mistaken, it's in at the end of the second movie. And they're taking Han Solo to the ship. And the scale of the ship looks very much like the way you see it here, where Boba Fett at the time is walking Han Solo in the frozen carbonite up the back ramp. This looks to be the scale. We don't really know at that time the interior. There may have been some, you know, not at the time of the exact movie, but probably many years later, they probably had a lot of, you know, different fan breakdown of the scaling of the ship, the interior, because you can see that online now. I don't know at what point did they really kind of break that down and have that kind of stuff inside, you know, the lore, as far as people having a look of what that looked like. But as far as at that time of the movie, when the movie came out, I am sure, which is like, I think I want to say like 80, 81, I'm sure the only interpretation of the Slave One was from that movie. And so from that basis, this scale with the UCS set, as you see it here, definitely fits within line of how it was in the movie. Then you fast forward 40 years later, and you have the Book of Boba Fett show. And I'm not sure if it was in the Book of Boba Fett show or if it was in a Mandalorian show, but where they show the interior of the ship. Now, granted, it's Boba Fett's ship at the time, similar to what it was inside that original movie, but the scale of the size of the ship should be the same, even though the interior layout is a little differently than what you would see in Jango Slave 1 versus Boba Slave 1. But nonetheless, though there have been some interior changes, the size of the interior, the physical size of the ship should be the same. What's interesting is, from my eyes, in the second movie of the original trilogy, it looked comparable to this size. In the second movie to the prequels, I want to say that it looked a little bit bigger. It almost looked the same, but you could feel like there was more space in the interior when you saw little Boba walking up the ramp to go to get into the ship. I think that was when finally Jango gets a chance to walk in after he's being attacked from by Obi-Wan. He's able to walk into the ship, but you do get that sense, like we get a little bit of a sense of the interior, and we go, okay, like it kind of looks a little big in there, not just from the screenshots when he's flying around, but I mean, when you have that scene where, you know, he's walking in from this way, and you have that scene where you can see, you know, he's walking in and it's just a lot of space, like going up inside that direction. Here, just to have a little bit lower angle. And that was kind of the vibe that you had inside the second movie of the prequels. And essentially, you could see the inside, you could see that interior, and it really comes off where, like, okay, you know that there's space inside there. But then now, fast forward, like I said, that wasn't 20 years later. 20 years later, we have the Mandalorian show, Book of Boba Fett, and there is that scene where a couple scenes when they're inside the ship. And at that point now, it's Boba Fett Slave 1 once again. And what you see is they've got, you know, they come in from this area, but obviously the orientation of the ship is all over the place in terms of the whole moving mechanisms inside, the moving parts. But the cargo, the seating area for the people, not like the cockpit area for where, you know, the main pilot will sit up here, but in the center area here rotates, and obviously this part rotates too on that one. So, but the center area always rotated for both of them, if I'm not mistaken, because that's how it always was built. But this part didn't rotate on Jango's, but on Boba's it did. But the point I was going to get at was that you see that lower sitting area in Boba Fett Slave 1, or I think that's behind the main cockpit area. I can't remember, but you guys know the imagery of how it looked if you watch the show. And it's just a massive, big deck that they're able to kind of sit on, this big common space area that rotates, and it's huge. And when you see that kind of space, you're like, how does that fit into this? It doesn't even seem like it makes sense. Then, if you look at like the kind of more interior designs of like photos, there's photos you can look at online. They kind of show almost like this blueprint design, shows the interior. Like, I think it's called like half screen is the term they use, or the people who post those image or whatever. But it's like where you kind of see a little bit of the exterior here, then this interior looks like, this whole side right here looks like see-through. And in it, what you notice is there's like floors that are going up this way. And in that photo, it makes this thing look about 3 times as big as it looks here. It's huge. And that gives the layout of the interior, but it makes the ship look borderline as big as the Millennium Falcon interior, but just not a pancake design. And I say that to say, you almost have like 2 different floors up here. You've got like 3 floors on this level, because you have the ground level that's, you know, this is, you know, not having that ground level because it's open, but it's like 3 floors almost like up here. Or, you know, and those floors are like against the wall here and against the wall that way. The center is just open space. So imagine it almost like, when you look at like like in those prison movies, and you'll have like the floors, and you're looking over the railing to the main center, open area. It's kind of like that. Bad example, but it's the only thing that could come to my mind. And that's kind of what it's like there from what I remember on the images. And then you have coming up this way, that center area where people can sit. And then you also have obviously the cockpit area here. But it's so much space, and that general space here before you get to the center area in this scale, as far as like the way the figure size is, would have been like this center area would be probably like about that wide. This area for the mid sitting area for passengers was like maybe that wide. And then obviously the cockpit is coming out like this wide. So it definitely is like huge when you look at that. So what's interesting is, though that was made after the fact, and though, however many years that they came up with that, designing the interior, that you could see it on these images, however that went, or whatever the case is for designing that, that wasn't the idea when they first designed the ship in the original trilogy, because it was definitely in line with this scale in the original trilogy. So it's very interesting. And then you could even date it back to when they had those sets, if you guys are familiar with the Star Wars Kenner sets, and they made the Boba Fett Slave One. And even though I'm not going to say that it was necessarily 1-to-1 scale or anything like that, especially for that size, because it's almost like as big as this, but the figures are like 3 3/4 inch figures. But the fact that, they nowhere near tried to make it on the same scale as the Millennium Falcon of that same series set tells you where their mindset was at. Like, okay, they said to themselves, there's not a big interior. So I thought that was very interesting. So with that being said, there really is no true scale of the Slave One, in my opinion, when it comes to that, because it's very much all over the place. They have the layout of how long it is, the dimensions, the exterior dimensions, but that doesn't line up with what the interior is and how the interior seems to get morphed all the time with the way it looks. And because of that, I had, this is in my review video, so it's just kind of a recap, but I had decided to really take out that second row of seats that are on the lower half, which actually, if I'm not mistaken, in canon should have been rotating, but they didn't necessarily make them rotating because it probably would have been too hard. So it's better that they don't do things like that if it means that it's going to be better. But what I had decided to do at the time was, and I'm going to remove this piece out here. So another thing too is on, I want to say in Jango's ship, not Boba's ship, but in Jango's ship, behind the cockpit is supposed to be his bed. Like there's a doorway that leads to his bed. Obviously in this one, they just have that little space there. Someone could probably really mod that. And I'll be honest with you, I think it's possible to turn into a bed. You just have to be really good at modding, and you get in there and kind of make a foundation that it can rest on. But I do think it's possible to kind of pull off. You would have to get rid of this back piece here, so this lays flush, and it's not digging into that space, rather than be a little place for the weapons. But I think it would be able to be pulled off. But I think that looks nice. Everything about this set looks nice, even though, like I said, this is one of those ships that you can play with the idea of how it looks and whatnot, and the way it's supposed to be designed. But for when I made my mods, and it's funny because since the time that I did this review of this ship, I haven't seen a lot of people who made mods. I've seen like one person who did a couple of videos where they made mods, and that was about it. So one thing that was in the interior of this ship naturally was, like I said, in the half screen image, is you have these kind of, it's on the left and on the right side, there would be these kind of bunk bed type of setups where you have like where the carbonites would rest, and they would lay them down on there. So they look like bunk bed-ish type thing. So that's where I had the idea to want to put something like that in here, which is what I did. I have my dash my Dash Rendar figure in here. My custom Dash Rendar figure here is just a Han Solo with orange hair, and as a prisoner. And so I had put this here as an area for the prisoners to sit in, a little bunk bed set up. They could put their feet down there at the bottom end, and they could just be in there sitting. And then you have a little, let me try to zoom in there a little bit. There is the little workbench that I had put there. Sorry, my figures are now in the way, getting knocked over by the wings. So here you have the little workbench I had set up, and all these were pretty much done with the same pieces that came with the set, aside from the two 2x8 beams were the only ones that didn't come with this set, but that's something that almost anyone can get a hold of pretty easy. So here, and obviously the little cargo baskets, everyone has them. If you don't need them, they're not required. But the bench and everything that I have here set up, let me pull these off real quick. And even the little jumper blocks that are there, jumper plates, all came with it. These are part of the sets that made up that the other seating area that would be here. But this was to give it some interior space because it didn't have any interior space really, which, like I said, when you look at the way that the Slave 1, the dimensions and all, physically in canon, it looks like the size of this ship that you see in front of you. But space-wise on the inside, on the original trilogy, we didn't know it was in the inside. So technically this could be suiting to exactly how it would be. Some space to put in your cargo, and just an area, sitting area for Boba. But in the half screen image, you see so much more going on. Now, obviously, in these kind of builds, you really can't, with the Technic stuff, really put a lot of stuff here. That would be almost impossible to a degree. Without, you'd be losing the stir. I'm sorry, I'm talking and I gotta pull back so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So coming back here, you wouldn't really be able to do that because you need the Technic space, the Technic bricks, to really kind of give it that support. But so you wouldn't really be able to utilize that space. But I just thought it was interesting. I just think it's an interesting ship when it comes to that. It's a fan favorite ship. I know a lot of people love this ship. It is just as classic as the Millennium Falcon, and obviously came from the same era, but it definitely is a mysterious ship when it comes to figuring out that size ratio for the interior. So that, I think, is just very interesting. Now, everybody knows that Lego minifigures don't scale directly to human size because they're wider than they are taller. But if you were to take the scale that one stud is 1 foot, based on the fact that I did show you a quick measuring scale right here. If a Lego figure is, we'll say, hold on here. I gotta be able to see some studs on here so I can. So right here, you could see that the figure comes to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a little bit over 5 studs, close to like just shy of the 6 stud mark. So if you were to say that using that scale, that each stud is about, being that he's a little bit over 5 studs, we'll say that makes the average figure maybe about the equivalent of, like, I don't know, 5'8", we'll say. So let's say Lego people in general, a little bit shorter than the average 6 foot height that they say a regular man is, which most people aren't 6 feet in height. But anyway, we can use that to make the scale of, and a lot of people do this, they make the scale of 1 stud to be 1 foot. So with that being said, if you add up, so the set, and it says it on the little placard, it says that this ship is 21.5 meters in length. Now, sorry about that, guys. It's very dusty. It's on display all the time, so don't mind. But anyway, 21.5 meters. And that roughly, I was trying to get my smart speaker to translate it for me, and my smart speaker is acting up right now. But roughly, that's usually 3 times in feet. So somewhere around, 75, almost 75 feet or somewhere around there. And is that about 60, probably like high 60s, almost 70 feet, somewhere in that range, 65 feet, almost 70 feet in length, 70, 75 feet. So if you count the studs on here, it equates to that same length. So you know that this is actually within Lego's kind of warped scale of, like I said, the people being a little more wider than they are tall. It fits into that scale range. So it's interesting, but I just find it to be just a very interesting ship. Very interesting ship. And just wanted to kind of have that little rant about it. If you guys ever have any ideas in terms of that you guys ever modded, I would love to hear you guys mention, anything that you guys have done in regards to modding, because I haven't seen a lot of people do any modding on the ship. And even though I do feel that the interior sitting area, the second sitting area, was actually done very nicely, I also feel though that, I myself just had to have a little more stuff going on in that area to feel like I had interior space. So I love the idea of figures. Sorry, just putting my dash on here. Figures being able to actually walk around in the cabin to some degree. I just think that that's really cool. In this case here, if it's stationary, I can put him down without any kind of studs or anything, and he's able to fit without a problem. Working on his little bench and working on his weapons or whatever the case is. But yes, if you guys, like I said, have any kind of mods that you guys have done, let me know, post them down below inside the comments. I definitely would like to know in that regards. And as always, you guys, like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.